Ebirah, Horror of the Deep, or as it was known in Japan, Godzilla, Ebirah, Mothra, Big Duel in the South Seas. Doesn't that just roll off the tongue? This was directed by Jun Fukuda, and, well, this is where things start to get a bit silly. It had been leaning that way with the previous two entries, but now, like when Godzilla's fighting a lobster, yeah, we have officially gotten into just full-on silly territory. Now, there's actually a lot going on behind this movie that's honestly more interesting than anything in this movie. To make a long story short, this movie was meant to be a co-production between Toho and Rankin Bass. Yes, the Rankin Bass people behind those Christmas specials we all know and love, plus tons of cartoons that you've probably watched but never attributed to Rankin Bass. They, being Toho and Rankin Bass, were going to be working together on an animated King Kong show called The King Kong Show. Everything was just original like that in the mid to late 60s. And this was meant to be a King Kong movie. This was meant to be called, to read just to read the title off, because it's another long one, folks. Operation Robinson Crusoe, King Kong vs. Ebirah. Where did Robinson Crusoe come into all of this? But there was just one problem with the union. They had different ideas when it came to creative teams. Toho wanted Jun Fukuda to direct the movie, which he ended up doing. However, Rankin Bass wanted Ishiro Honda to direct the movie. And they could not settle, and so Rankin Bass pulled out of the venture entirely and took King Kong with them. So you want to know why this movie is a Godzilla movie? Rankin Bass pulled King Kong out, and so Godzilla was slotted in. The two would eventually mend fences, and in a movie I'll be covering next week, they made King Kong escapes together. So everything came full circle at the end. Hope you liked that story, because it's more interesting than anything in this movie. I don't want to come across as harsh, because when the actual like Godzilla and Ebirah fights happen, they are fun, but the rest of the movie is honestly at a point where I'm just trying to I'm having a hard time remembering what happened. There's something about a terrorist organization named Red Bamboo who makes heavy water to sell to terrorists for weapons. And then there's another thing with the natives on this island who worship Mothra as a god. These could have been potentially interesting, but I don't think even the movie is even interested in exploring these ideas. It just acts as a vehicle to get Godzilla and Ebirah into the same frames as each other. And don't get me wrong, when this does actually happen, it's fun. But you definitely get the sense that this was supposed to be a King Kong movie. It raises a lot of questions for me. Like, can King Kong swim? Like, how is a massive gorilla gonna defeat a massive lobster in like in like in like Ebirah's home, the sea? Like King Kong's a land creature, like freaking Ebirah is a lobster, and his home is the sea. Like Toho did not think this one through.
Or whose brain works this way? Whose brain operates in this fashion?
You definitely get the feeling that this was a Frankenstein like level script. It was like cut from here, bring this one over here, let's throw it together and see what happens. This movie is pretty forgettable. It's not bad. There's definitely some fun stuff here, especially when Godzilla fights Ebirah. But I feel like there were good ideas, but they were just never capitalized on. But we kick off next week with a look, finally, at a King Kong movie. We've covered Godzilla for so long that you forget that Kong is a part of this series too. But we're going to be covering the sequel to Godzilla versus, or King Kong versus Godzilla, and one of, if not the only, Toho directed King Kong movies. It is King Kong Escapes.